All right, we're recording. This is the Gateway API meeting, last one in April and the last one for V1 Alpha 1, I think. I wanted to highlight a couple of community blog posts you've probably all seen. CNCF yesterday had a blog post covering Contour and Gateway API, which I thought was really cool. I think, Damien, you were one of the authors on this one. Yeah. And so great to see some more coverage there. There was a Kubernetes blog post, which many were authors of. Also great to see. So yeah, just highlighting those. And I think there's going to be more coming where that's with, I know on Google's side, we've got a Learn Kubernetes with Google series, which is going to be covering Gateway API. And tomorrow we're hoping to launch public preview for our implementation. And I imagine there's plenty more outside. They'll be coming in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's exciting. Also of interest in the community, you may have noticed that I think it's a DataWire, but the project formerly known as Ambassador has built-in support for Gateway now. So that's exciting to see. Yeah, so just random community tidbits, but let's move on to actually talking about meeting times. Relatively limited group here today, so I don't know that we can make a decision on this quite yet. But I wanted to highlight that there is that straw poll. I think everyone here has responded to it already. I would like to shift meeting times sometime soon. The leading contender based on Pacific times, it would be Mondays at 3, which we had 8 people respond yes to. And similarly, Tuesdays at 10 had a fair amount of yeses. And Tuesdays at 10 is particularly interesting in that it enables a larger chunk of the European maintainers to show up. So Mondays at 3 is more friendly for APAC, and Thursdays at 10 more friendly for Europe. So there's not a lot of overlap between those two meeting times, unfortunately, but that does cover everyone who's responded to the survey so far. So I'm kind of leaning towards that kind of split, alternating back and forth, but I know that does add some confusion and some overhead. So if anyone has strong feelings about when we do meeting times, let me know.
Hey, Rob. I'd like to.
My audio is broken, I think. Yeah, okay, 1 second. So if anyone has been saying anything, it is okay. Now I should be able to hear you. Sorry for the confusion.
Rob, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. I was going to say it'd be nice if we could actually proceed with both the Monday and Tuesday and just alternate, because I know we've got several contributors that are out of Australia that would be unable to ever attend if it was at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem we have right now with this meeting time. Although we've had some attendance from Nick and James, it's been pretty sparse.
Yeah,
and I can really understand why.
Yeah. So I thought if we could at least alternate, that would give them an opportunity every other week, give them a viable option to attend.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and we've also started to get more involvement from traffic and I guess even to some point Glue, which would be East Coast, but kind of the earlier time zones, and so getting some more involvement from them would be good if we had a morning my time meeting as well. So that's kind of what I'm thinking between the two. You could also argue that the most people responded with Mondays at 3, and we could just do that. But I'm interested in trying to provide opportunities for everyone to attend. So I think it's worthwhile to flip between these times.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we're going to see additional participation after KubeCon, and it would be nice to
Yep.
have a little more time zone coverage.
Yep. Agreed. Related to KubeCon, that's a good segue here. I was chatting with Nick yesterday on Slack, and one of the things that he brought up is it would be helpful if we could get together and try to figure out, try to develop some kind of consistent approach to how gateways are mapped with in-cluster proxies. I spent some time preparing for KubeCon, actually testing out all the implementations I could, and I saw a fair amount of variation in how in-cluster proxies mapped the concept of a gateway to their implementation. Whether it was a single gateway per deployment of a control plane, or whether you just merged gateways together, or whatever it was, there was a fair amount of variation. I'm not saying that we need to specify it has to be exactly this way, but it could be useful to get some of the maintainers together that are working on these in-cluster proxies and see if there's some common ground, see if there's some guidelines that we can provide, whatever that looks like, so we have an easier task when it comes to conformance and consistency across these implementations.
It's basically giving names to categories, Rob.
Yeah, giving names to categories, but also trying to identify patterns that make sense or don't make sense. There's definitely variation, and I know it sounds like Contour is still trying to figure out what the correct mapping is, and that's my understanding with some of the other implementations as well. So it could be interesting to try and just focus on that. And the reason I'm bringing this up specifically is that Nick mentioned next week he's going to be working on EU time for the sake of KubeCon, which means we have an opportunity where we might have overlap with a larger chunk of in-cluster proxy implementers sometime next week. So I'm interested in trying to get something organized there, really informal, but just try and get in. Basically, one issue we have right now is we have maintainers in Europe and Australia that never get to talk to each other, well, not formally in these meetings anyways. And it would be great if we could try and bring everyone together for this opportunity, since it's KubeCon, even though it's virtual, to try and make some connections and some, best practices or recommendations for how this can be done. So I don't know if anyone's interested in that. I can follow up later in Slack, but I just wanted to bring this idea up. I think next week does provide a good opportunity for these kind of, I know it's still a virtual KubeCon, but we can still have these kind of sessions and just, brainstorming ideas, especially when you can get people that don't usually overlap in time overlapping. So yeah, is anyone interested in that kind of idea?
Yeah, but do we have this meeting overlapping with that? Maybe we just switch the meeting times and then that's just the meeting. You're
right,
basically
so
saying there's an extra meeting or
what I'm really, I don't even know that it needs to be a formal meeting per se. And what I want is I don't want that meeting to get there's a lot that we need to cover in our community meetings, especially next week. I think next week is going to be our kickoff for V1 Alpha 2, and there's a lot of content to get through. And okay, maybe that's naive. Maybe there won't be many people around because it is KubeCon. I'm not sure. But what I really wanted to do is I didn't want to distract from, I wanted to have a meeting that was entirely focused on in-cluster proxy implementations and trying to find some common ground in between them. Because our meetings really cover everything from issue triage to, V1 Alpha 2 planning or whatever it happens to be. And I think that's valuable. But in this case, I just wanted to take advantage of overlapping times of maintainers. for a very specific topic.
Yeah, I think though, like if we want to get all of the implementers, I don't like, maybe it's worth floating a shared doc first and then have everyone come in, because having everyone come in,
Yeah, you're right.
even if it's like KubeCon where people supposedly are going to be awake at that time period, it's like not a guarantee.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, yeah, I'll think about that some more. If anyone has ideas about that, or if this is something like that others have been thinking about more, whether it's Contour, Istio, or traffic or whatever, I'm just interested in trying to find some common ground among these implementations. So yeah, I think you're right, Bowie. I think the next natural step would be to have a doc where we can start brainstorming, and maybe that turns into some kind of natural meeting. Okay. With that, I also wanted to throw out here, I've just kind of by default been leading, organizing, whatever these meetings. I don't have any need to do that. If there's other people who want to rotate with me or be part of this or try it out once or twice, by all means, if anyone is interested, just let me know. I don't need to be the one to do this.
So I think like Rob, maybe it's worth putting in this doc somehow the next few sessions, and then people can sign themselves up.
Yeah.
If we wanted to rotate.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think, well, we'll see. I don't know that we'll have time to cover this in this meeting, but we're about to transition in what I think is a pretty significant way in these meetings and in what we're focusing on Gateway to V1 Alpha 2, because we've intentionally been focusing on these kind of smaller iterative changes in these meetings and our work on the API. And once V0.3 releases tomorrow, that all switches and we start talking about bigger picture things all over again, and potentially significant changes. And I have a few ideas queued up. We have some issues queued up that are, labeled breaking change or V1 Alpha 2. And I do think it would be good to have some kind of structure around when we discuss those. So maybe I think we have enough concepts we want to get into V1 Alpha 2 that we can probably schedule out meetings, a few at a time kind of thing. And then if there's, like you're mentioning, someone that's interested in leading discussion on a topic, that'd be a good place to volunteer. Yeah.
So Rob, let's see, we cut V1 basically today or tomorrow. I see tomorrow. Yeah, so like between that and the next session, I think we could just use this doc. There's no need creating another doc to throw down those big meetings, and then we can schedule them. So that sounds great.
Yeah, agreed. Cool. All right, let's move on then. Let's take a look at the milestone. I think we're awfully close here. I know Harry has a lot of meetings this week, and I don't think he's going to be as responsive for the next couple of days, but he has done incredible work on his validating webhook, and I think we can almost consider this one closed. Just this morning, we finally got the last test infra PR merged in. I think that may be the final piece. We may need a small PR to fix a couple things in this repo, but I think it's awfully close. And this certainly does not need to block V1 Alpha 1 in any way, but it's exciting to see it just about ready. This is one that Manuel took on with this PR. And I think this one is awfully close as well. This is cleaning up documentation around gateways, routes, and TLS. And I think the main concept here is, is actually showing this idea of given this listener protocol, this is the TLS modes and routes that are supported. This is really just a summary of a conversation of a good Slack thread from a few weeks ago, and just wanted to make sure it got recorded. I think this is not everything we need to say about TLS, but I think this is a good addition. Does anything, for anyone looking at this for the first time, does anything in here look wrong?
I was just going to mention that we should move this into the concept. Like, we should take this out of the guide and move it into the concepts. This PR, like, I don't see any issue with, recording it in the guide now, but at some point we should move it to the concepts.
Yeah, yes, I agree. I had a similar thought when I was looking at this PR, and I said, wow, this doesn't feel like it needs to belong in a guide. And then I was looking for our concepts TLS, and we don't have one. And I looked at our TLS guide, and it feels pretty similar to a concepts page and less similar to a guide. But like you said, doesn't need to happen now. But I agree that this feels somewhat out of place as a guide, and maybe we need to split this up. But for now, it's good content to have. Okay, cool. I'll run with this. I think he had just a few little follow-up items to do on this. There were a few, I added a few nitpicks at the bottom, but otherwise, I think this should make it in time. What else is in the milestone? Bowie, I think the last one belongs to you.
Yeah, this one should be very simple. People can take a look at it. Basically taking that comment at the bottom and putting it in the concepts or guidelines. We haven't made it consistent in the code base because we have to go and fix it, but I would take that on as like a separate thing. I don't want to go and change like a ton of stuff right at the last moment.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think one thing that's going to be confusing here is our docs right now have the concept of a custom support level, but I don't think we do a good job of just defining implementation specific. And I think we're using the two terms interchangeably here. I maybe at least in terms of docs, we should just either update our current reference to custom to be implementation specific, or update this to be custom. I don't have a strong preference for naming here.
Wait, Rob, the whole point is that this distinguishes it from custom. So if you're proposing the latter, then actually calling this out is a little bit strange.
Okay, so
it says right here, wait, just go to custom.
Yeah.
It says custom features will not have API types and schema except via generic extension points.
Okay, so yeah, we've really been misusing that. Yeah, that's confusing because we definitely have custom listed as conformance where we may want implementate, like it's not extended.
So I think like wherever custom is just saying that it's like, where will you go to look for the custom stuff? It's not going to be here. I'm just, we're just saying that, but it's only supposed to appear in the documentation. And then for the generic extension points, that's where it says like, hey, your custom stuff will be here. But it should not be used in a particular field that exists, that then we say, well, actually, I take that back. I think like we need to look at where it exists, because I don't want to make a blanket statement.
Yeah, so I just because I've been working on HTTP route recently and dealing with this specific conformance, bit, I think this is a good example of us using the two interchangeably. So you can see support implementation specific here for,
That one is custom because it is a generic reference that could go to something else.
so,
If that makes
so
sense.
so custom, but that's an API type. So this is
No, so
defined.
okay, maybe. So for example, regex is a good implementation specific thing because we define everything else around that except for the nitty gritty behavior of the regex
Yeah.
match, right? That's like a good example. I think this
Right,
one
that's-
is custom because, yeah, this one should be implementation specific. In
Wait.
fact, implementation specific is just right there.
Right, that's so implementation specific is actually a path match type or a param match type. I mean, we use the same types for a variety of things here.
So I think regular
Interesting.
expression was originally intended to be extended because I don't know if everyone was able to support it, but the behavior we said would be implementation specific just because it was just too hard to generalize, or it's like there's very little point to generalizing. This is not custom because it's not like you have a reference to another resource that could be of any type. I think that is the most clear distinction is, for example, that certificate ref actually could reference some CRD that someone has produced from somewhere else. That's what's meant by it's not part of the type system.
So, okay, so we went and introduce an entire type, an entire struct type, shall we say, that was custom conformance, but we might have a match type or something like that that was custom conformance because that referred to something like that was implementation specific.
Yeah, implementation specific in quotes, or it's just specific to the implementation. Let's just distinguish that. What's meant by custom is that it's basically just all the random extension points that we have everywhere. And to actually add a custom feature requires you to use that extension point.
Okay. So should we be calling, so should we ever have support implementation specific, or should we just have support custom everywhere? Maybe I'm misunderstanding this.
So here, the support for different resource types will be custom, like we don't say anything about it. But we note that this is a place where you can introduce different types. Where implementation specific can't be a support thing, it's, I guess, it's like we define almost everything about the feature except for this one aspect, and that aspect we say will be implementation specific behavior.
Okay.
If it's a subtle difference, I think the fact that it appears in the schema as not a reference to something, some other types, indicates to me that it's talking about implementation specific behavior, not custom. Custom set is, to me, is defined as like it's going to refer to someone else's CRD. I think like if you boil it down to what it probably results in.
So yeah, so I guess my question is, if we are going to say that both custom and implementation specific are valid values here, it feels like
I'm
we
not
should
saying that
have...
implementation specific is not valid here.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, so it really should be custom. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, support of other types is custom. Like it's like you're free to add other resources there.
Okay. Yeah, that I think that makes sense. I'm interested. And to anyone else, does this match what you were thinking here?
I do think like we need to scan through just to see where we've put that to make sure. as I was trying like 10 minutes ago, I was like making a blanket statement and I realized like we really need to look at it.
Yeah. I do think we've used support type custom more than implementation specific, but I'm not sure.
I mean, we have like the way that I view this is support colon, but we're talking about the support level, right? I mean, and building conformance tests around those different support levels. And if we go back to the beginning of the project, I think, Bowie, this is even a slide that you put together that has the blocks with the arrow saying, you know, gravity or something like that, right? And if I recall correctly, the outer was custom and then it was extended and then core, right? And so I think to simplify things is we look at it as like, why are we even specifying support here, right? This is to identify what level of support that, you know, a user can expect. So I think we simplify or standardize on the 3 support levels of core, extended, and custom.
Yeah, that's true. I guess like we should boil it down to what does this actually mean? Because let's say you're writing conformance tests, like what would you do for custom? For custom here, would it mean that, maybe this is just being very picky, like, does it mean that, for example, let's say you had regular expressions as extended, that means that if you supported regular expressions, you can specify regular expressions in a portable way, but the behavior of the regular expression is not the same, versus custom means that you could do anything. I guess it's less relevant here because it's very specific here.
Yeah, I feel like anything that's listed as support custom just would not be covered by conformance.
But we kind of do want to say
Or maybe
that, hey,
it would
you
be,
can...
but it would. Go ahead, Bowie.
Yeah, I was, maybe implementation specific is just like a very narrow thing where we say that for the most part, it's going to be portable. And then there's this one aspect that we say, hey, that's implementation specific. So we can make it generic. At least that's the way philosophically I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, the way I see it is that, you know, whatever fields used, if it's core, then it would be covered by the, the core conformance tests. I go ahead, use another field that it's extended. Okay, well, that's covered by the project's conformance tests. And I'm using Contour as my implementation. I'm using particular fields that are implementation specific. I would expect that Contour would then provide those conformance tests, or maybe, I don't know if those implementations or custom conformance tests live in the project. Have we covered that before, where implementations like Contour would then write their own custom conformance tests, or would those live in the particular project's repo? I guess that's
What?
Yeah, I think like for
discuss that.
custom, it seems to me to make the most sense that it lives outside. Here, I think
Yeah.
we have the original intent is that regular expression is extended, but the behavior is implementation specific, if that makes sense. Like, it's not the
Yeah,
case that
no
regular
problem.
expression, because it appears as an API type, like we need to say what it means. It can't be custom, because custom, right, it's like a little bit of a nesting here.
Okay, yeah, it seems like the big follow-up here is to run through and actually look for support type implementation specific. I think it's fairly rare that we use this, and if it is, I can make a quick PR just to update those to use custom. And I think we also have to follow up on actually reviewing this kind of description of implementation specific, which is more this is like a decorator on custom. Is that correct?
No, it's not decorator on custom. Sorry, if you read it's a decorator on core and extended, because we live in a reality where things are like mostly but not entirely portable. That's the whole point of this. Is that we can
Okay, so-
basically define, like, let's say regular expression was a bit more complicated, but the only thing that wasn't portable was the nitty gritty of how the match works, right? You can define other things. Let's say we define like case insensitivity or something. I don't know, but like those things we can extract out to the portable layer, and we have this carve out that's like, well, you need to go, you can describe it generically in this aspect of it, but you need to go look up this one piece of it, and that's well defined. That's what I was saying was implementation specific, because then it lets us cover more surface area with the API, as opposed to, right, like if as soon as one aspect of something is like not super portable everywhere, then we just can't talk about it at all. That was my concern.
Okay, so really what you're proposing here is almost a new concept of that would allow us to elevate some concepts that we currently just call custom because they're not fully portable to extended implementation specific.
Yeah, like it would be a shame if just one little thing caused it to not be able to be extended. And we know, like, it's just the nature of the thing, regular expression being this canonical example of where it's like, it's already too late and we don't foresee the community kind of fixing it in any way unless something amazing happens. But at the same time, like everyone has regular expressions. And to not give the user that knob and to just basically say they have to say just implementation specific just feels not right. So that's why we have regular expression here specifically as a type, rather than just say, if you want to use regular expressions, you have to just go implementation specific.
Okay. All right. I think this concept also may come into play for, say, timeouts or some of our extended configuration where timeouts are similar in concept, but have somewhat significant differences. You know, when the time starts and ends that it's measuring, as an example.
Yeah, I think like we have to use it very judiciously. So it's not like we can just kind of slap it everywhere. But even just a bit, even quote unquote portable is not like, there are some leeway, right? So I just don't want to like end up in this situation where some tiny mismatch then kind of voids a whole useful thing for the user. I think like in this case, being able to specify that it uses regular expression is like very useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I'll take a look at this. And if anyone else can take a look as well. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, let's keep on moving because I want to make sure we get to our 030 release discussion here. Tomorrow, I want to make sure that there's a changelog PR that's ready to go. If anyone wants to volunteer to take that on, feel free. Otherwise, I can do it. Then we need to tag and publish the release. And finally, we want to make a PR to actually flip everything over so that it's clear that V1 Alpha 1 is frozen and V1 Alpha 2 is where all additional changes go. And so I wrote down what I think this process should look like. Obviously, we want to generate a new V1 Alpha 2 API. I think we want to copy our docs to V1 Alpha 2, like, so we have a new directory where we can continue updating docs based on V1 Alpha 2. And eventually that can graduate to be our main doc site. But initially it will just be gateway API SIGs K8s IO / v1 alpha 2. And then we can also add a note in our README that although we have v1 alpha 2 checked in, it's unstable and not yet released. This is kind of how I envisioned supporting both. I do want to keep it simple and just any future changes go to v1 alpha 2. They don't go to v1 alpha 1. So releases and everything else are a little simpler to understand. But I'm interested if that makes sense to others or if that's maybe too limited in scope to completely lock down v1 alpha 1. And no big deal. I plan on creating a PR that will actually do this and can get feedback on it at that point as well. But that's kind of my vision going forward is I want to really focus on v1 alpha 2 and drive all our effort towards that. And so I think freezing v1 alpha 1 at this point is probably the easiest way to do that. So ping me on Slack or anywhere if you're interested in being part of this release process. It's always cool to have more people that are involved in the release process, but I also recognize this is a busy time of year for everyone. So if there isn't bandwidth, I'm happy to take this on. At a minimum, I would like a couple sets of eyes on this changelog PR. As in the past, we really wanted to get consensus before release among maintainers that this is a release we want to do. And we've done that on the changelog PR. So we wanted, I think, a majority of maintainers to be on board with the changelog PR. And once they were, that was kind of approval to publish a release based on that. So I'll be pinging people for reviews on this. That makes sense. Any questions about the release process?
That sounds good to me.
Cool. All right. I think we're moving along pretty good here. There have been a couple issues raised here. Thank you, Bowie, for a follow-up issue to actually make sure that this is consistent. Steve had an interesting issue. Well, let's go back to, I usually try and cover everything in the past week. And let's start back at the beginning here, which is the conflicting SNIs between HTTP route and TLS route. Unfortunately, it looks like the people that are most involved in this conversation are not on this call. And I don't have a lot of context to add to this one. I don't know, has anyone else been paying attention to this?
Yeah, I think we just have to follow up on Slack for now until the meeting times have kind of flip-flopped.
Yeah. Okay. I'll leave that as is then. And there's also a request for method-based routing. I'm curious out there. Oh yeah, we're starting to get feature requests from DataWire team. That's cool. I'm curious how broadly this is supported.
It seems reasonable. There is one thing with Connect that we need to kind of figure out.
With Connect? What?
Because I think if you go down like Connect as a, oh wait, is Connect a method?
I don't think so. No, I mean,
Sorry, maybe I'm just getting confused.
Yeah, this is just, so what it would be options, get, put, post, delete, patch, depending on your support level. Oh, Connect is a method. Thank you for correcting me. Okay.
Yeah. So Connect is like a little bit of like I don't know, like Liger, or it's like neither here nor there. So most of the verbs are basically the same except for connect.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, it
It's same
seems
as
like,
in like they basically are extra headers. The
yeah,
connect is just like a very odd beast because it's like go do something else entirely.
sure. Okay. Good to know. I
And
had
then I
not
think
paid attention to
trace is
that.
another one. Options maybe.
Yeah, options is,
Yeah, there are a couple oddballs, and we should
yeah,
call it out. Like it might make sense for the normal ones, and the oddballs we would kind of have to evaluate.
that's fair. We could consider extended support for, you know, the core methods here and specifically list them out, and then custom support for anything beyond that. Not sure.
Yeah, like yeah, like options and it's trace as well. If anyone uses
Yeah.
trace.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Is anyone working on an implementation that could not support this? Well, method-based routing.
I think if it's extended, that reduces
Yeah.
the impact of that question.
Yeah. Okay. Then moving back up here, this is just to follow up when Harry was building the image. His scripting really just used the default AMD 64 architecture. It is not hard to either build it yourself or anything else, but right now it's kind of, I think it's hard coded in here somewhere.
Yeah, we should yeah, this is almost like a to do. We do
Yeah,
need to. We should be nice and just build for the most popular architectures.
yeah,
AMD
yeah. I
64, I
mean,
guess, is the common one.
I think it
Sorry,
is.
ARM
And
64. ARM 64.
wait, no, this, I think this is the most common, but whatever it is, I don't know how much it matters because it's a Docker image for our webhook, you know, like how many people are going to be, I don't know. I guess it would be good to, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
think
how many
like
people
this
are building.
probably this is like on demand. Like basically,
Yeah,
I'm sure ARM 64 will happen at some point, and then
yeah,
just on demand we'll add it.
yeah. I agree with that.
Can we just
Harry
freeze that
also,
feature because it's highly likely we'll not get to it, and FataBot is going to bother us all endlessly about it.
that's a good idea. Cool. All right. This is also a good one that really we need to pull in API machinery. Yeah, it's been suggested that I think what we're trying to do with this project as a whole is, you know, mostly networking focused, but we're also somewhat by default also trying to push forward the CRD ecosystem. So projects like this can become more practical. And that means we get to run into fun things like the pain of kubectl output right now, enforcing immutability, variety of things like, yeah, that we need to have our validating webhook, these kinds of things. I know I've talked to people in API machinery about at least the first, no, all of these actually. But this is probably something that we should bring to API machinery as a whole in some kind of clear format to see if there's any plans to help on any of these. I have an upstream PR that should help with this one. But some of the other ones are bigger questions. I know there were some significant complexity around enforcing immutability here, at least with a webhook. Like what, anyways, so more to be discussed on this one. One somewhat nice thing about changing our meeting times is we'll no longer overlap with every other SIG in the world. Right now it's the same meeting time as SIG auth and SIG API machinery, which I've wanted to bring topics to, and hard to do both. So anyways, that will be one advantage about moving our meeting time. Cool. All right, request filtering between gateways and namespace routes. This is, I was glad to see this as a user request because I really wanted to focus on this in V1 Alpha 2 or spend some time talking about this concept. But actually getting a proper request for it helps ensure that happens. This is a concept, I think, that goes back to the very beginning origin stories of this API, and the idea that, hey, it'd be really cool if you could delegate routes, if you could delegate from one route to another route. And this also overlaps in concept with another idea, and that's, can you forward across namespaces from routes? Can routes reference other resources in other namespaces? Because theoretically, the reason you'd want to delegate a route is this very specific example of you want to give the /cats path and anything below that to the cats namespace, and /dogs and anything below that to the dogs namespace, right? That seems like a pretty clear example of something like you might want to do. And I don't know that this delegation is really as meaningful or valuable if you can't cross that namespace boundary. So this really pushes the boundaries in two directions. One, that kind of route delegation concept, but also the cross namespace concept. I don't have a good answer for how we do this and how we do this safely without just overcomplicating the API. But I know this concept has been interesting for a while. I don't know, Bowie or anyone who, do you remember? Yeah, okay, John, it looks like you referenced some prior art here with the virtual service delegation.
Yeah, unfortunately it's a bit circular because we implemented it because the Gateway API was planning it originally. So,
okay, yeah.
But
so we can learn
it,
from any bad experiences.
Yeah.
And Danian, does Contour have some kind of concept like this?
They have inclusion now, I think, or something. I forget. They used to have delegate. Or
Yeah, I
have
believe
delegate.
what Bowie's saying is there's inclusion.
So is that, so I'm not as familiar with inclusion. Is that similar in concept to this, or?
I believe so. I mean, I'm still learning about it. There's a lot of aspects of Contour I'm still coming up to speed on.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think the tricky thing is that most implementations probably can't, like logically we have like 2 tiers of routing, right? With the like root and the leaf or whatever you want to call it. But most implementations probably can't actually do that in the internal implementation. So they have to take the 2 levels and flatten them.
Yeah.
Which can be extremely tricky if the matching logic is complex. Like here it's simple, like /cats goes to cats, /dogs goes to dogs. No problem. But then if you throw in a regex or you throw in some custom matching, maybe it gets really tricky. So I think in the Istio one, we just like really limit it down in validation. So like you can only have a few different types of match in the top level one. But that will definitely be, I think that's one of the trickiest parts to get right.
Yeah, I think like any proposal that makes it into our API has to be realizable without actually even knowing about the underlying implementation. Like it's almost syntax sugar with the RBAC associated with it. We'd have to see like from a user experience perspective if that meets people's use cases versus everyone wants to add all the bells and whistles, in which case we're just like, it can't really help you. Like you can't compute this thing.
Right, like it seems like if you were doing path matching, you'd have to have, yeah, well, again, this is also complicated because we have so many different kinds of matching, whether it's header matching, param matching. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like along with the webhook, we have to implement basically like a merger that people just use, as opposed to saying, hey, implementation, I'm going to tell you how it's supposed to be, because that description might very well be like one-to-one with the implementation.
Yeah. Yeah, but like focusing on path, I think it's reasonable to say that if a route is going to delegate to another route, the path match type would have to be prefix, and regex could not be found in any matcher for any routes involving delegation, whether they were the root or the leaf.
Yeah, and you can't have like filters or something. Like it would be very restricted to make this sensical. For example, like could you create like a circle?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and similarly, you need, I mean, we took so much effort to cross the namespace boundary between gateway and route. Crossing another namespace boundary is going to take some thoughts, and like you're saying, like it would have to be pretty restrictive all around to do this. But I still think it's valuable. It just will take some thought. All right, well, that's one fun thing to look forward to. The last issue I think that we have to cover today is missing service name behavior. I just got a quick look at this before the meeting today, and I thought it was a good kind of underspecified area. Right now, we're very strict with this, and that says if anything that you're referring to in the route can't be found, the route must be dropped from the gateway. And Steve raises what I think is a interesting use case of something like that that may feel too harsh. So in this case, let's say that you've got two matches. One of the matches is valid. It's referencing a valid service, and the other one is not matching a valid service. The service is invalid. You would think that there would be a way we could specify this in a way that you could retain this match and drop this match. But I don't know how to reflect that in status, or how to really communicate that in the spec. But this feels like something that we don't currently allow for in the spec, but that would provide a much better experience. Does anyone have any ideas on this?
I'm actually a bit concerned about both options, because if we drop a partial match, then now we're changing behavior, because before /blog went to boo hiss, and now it's suddenly going to valid service, which we maybe never want any request from /blog to go to valid service. Maybe that's a very bad thing for us. Now, if we drop all of them, then we have a huge blast radius, so that's also bad. It almost seems like if we have an invalid service, we just want to return like a 404. So we still do the match, and we still don't allow traffic to, we still don't like switch up the matching, but we just do a 404 directly to the response or something. Now for TCP and TLS, well, obviously we can't do that, but I suppose you could close a connection or something. But I'm a bit worried about either option of dropping routes.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That is definitely.
Wouldn't this be a 500 almost? Not a 500. Yeah, 500.
503, 503
Yeah,
maybe,
like gate
or
upstream, whatever it's called. It's like upstream is like not there kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, you're right. It probably shouldn't be 404, but some error code.
Yeah, it should be a 500. Like I forget what it's called, but it's like I'm sending it somewhere else, and that thing is not there. Like
Well, that thing is not there is 404, but 503. I
no,
think is what you're
no.
talking about.
404 is that your request is requesting something that does not exist. This is that the proxy is trying to go up to somewhere, and that thing that was configured is wrong, is not there.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So yeah, I think 503 is appropriate here. Service unavailable, whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. And that does ensure that we aren't routing. So I guess one extra level of complexity here is our conflict resolution. You could theoretically add this to conflict resolution and say if you have two equally matching rules and one resolves to a service and the other has an invalid service reference, you could trust the one that does. I think that's probably a step too
Yeah,
far.
but that's like a dynamic
Yeah,
thing. Our conflict resolution should be statically defined.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So given that, I think just adding guidance that you should 503 here, and then I don't know how we do status in a meaningful way here. Still need to figure this one out. The confusing thing about this is the route status is difficult to populate because multiple controllers could be routing to it. Multiple controllers could be using the same route. But yeah, that I think this is a good issue to follow up on. So we know at the very least, we know what we want the behavior to be. We just don't know how to communicate that to the user. Okay, well, I will leave it there. I know we're already past time. Just keep an eye out for a changelog PR, or ping me if you want to be involved in the release process at all. I think we're awfully close to getting our 030 release out, and then we get to focus on all kinds of new and exciting things. All right, well, have a good rest of your week.
Cheers.